On a rain-slicked highway outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a man who had built an empire on fear and control stopped for two shivering girls standing beside a smoking sedan. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their father was the federal prosecutor who had sworn to destroy him. What he discovered 3 days later would shatter everything he believed about loyalty, justice, and the thin line between salvation and damnation. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. Vincent Rossi had learned long ago that power in Philadelphia smelled like old leather and espresso. His office on the 3rd floor of a legitimate import business in South Philly carried both scents, mingling with the faint trace of his grandfather's cologne, a bottle he kept on the shelf but never wore. The November afternoon pressed gray against the windows, the kind of light that made the city look tired, worn at its edges like the brick row houses that lined his childhood streets. He stood at the window, watching delivery trucks navigate the narrow street below. 42 years old, Vincent carried himself with the careful posture of a man who understood that every gesture communicated intent. His suits were tailored in a shop on 9th Street, dark wool that spoke of success without ostentation. His hair, still thick and black except for distinguished silver at the temples, was always precisely cut, but it was his eyes, dark brown, almost black, that people remembered. They were eyes that assessed, calculated, and rarely revealed. "The DeLuca situation is handled," Marco said from the doorway. Vincent's cousin, his right hand for 15 years, held a manila folder but didn't enter without invitation. That was the kind of respect Vincent had cultivated, the invisible architecture of authority. Vincent nodded once. "And the payment?" "Delivered. They understand the terms." The terms. Everything in Vincent's world operated on terms, on agreements sealed with handshakes that meant more than contracts. His grandfather had built the foundation in the 1950s, running numbers and protection in the Italian neighborhoods. His father had expanded, diversified, legitimized where possible. Vincent had inherited an empire that straddled 2 worlds, the legitimate businesses that generated clean money, and the shadow operations that generated power. He had never wanted this life. That was the truth he carried like a stone in his chest. At 18, he'd had a scholarship to Temple University, plans to study architecture, dreams of designing buildings that would reshape Philadelphia's skyline. Then his father had been killed, a car bomb in the parking lot of a restaurant in Passyunk Square, and Vincent had been pulled into the family business like a man dragged underwater. 24 years later, he was the man others feared. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Angela. "Dinner Sunday? The kids miss their uncle?" He typed back a quick confirmation, feeling the familiar split in his identity. To Angela's children, he was Uncle Vinny who brought expensive gifts and told terrible jokes. They didn't know what he was. Angela knew, but they never spoke of it, maintaining the fiction that his wealth came entirely from import-export. "You heading out?" Marco asked. Vincent checked his watch. 4:30. He had a meeting at 7 with a city councilman who needed convincing on a zoning matter. Time to go home, shower, change. "Yeah, call me if anything develops." The rain started as he drove north on Broad Street in his black Mercedes sedan. November in Philadelphia meant early darkness and weather that couldn't decide between autumn and winter. The rain came down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and headlights. Vincent drove with the careful attention he brought to everything, his mind already running through the evening's conversation, the leverage points, the subtle threats wrapped in reasonable language. He was on I-76, heading toward his house in Gladwin, when he saw them. 2 small figures on the shoulder of the highway, standing beside a sedan with its hood up, smoke or steam rising into the rain. Vincent's first instinct was to keep driving. The highway was no place for good Samaritans, especially for a man in his position. But something made him slow down. Maybe the way they stood so close together. Maybe the fact that they were clearly children. Maybe some remnant of the person he'd been before his father's death. He pulled onto the shoulder 50 feet ahead, put on his hazards, and stepped out into the rain. They were girls, he realized as he approached. Twins, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with identical dark hair plastered to their heads by the rain. They wore matching purple jackets, now soaked through, and they stared at him with wide eyes that held fear and hope in equal measure. "You girls okay?" Vincent kept his distance, his hands visible. He knew how he looked. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive suit, a stranger approaching in the rain. "Our mom's car broke," one of them said. her voice shaking. "She went to get help, but she's been gone a really long time." Vincent looked at the car, an older Honda Civic, steam pouring from under the hood. He looked up and down the highway. No other cars had stopped. The rain was getting heavier, and the temperature was dropping. These girls had been standing here in the cold, waiting. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know," the other twin said. "Maybe an hour. We're really cold." An hour. Their mother had left them here for an hour. Vincent felt anger rise in his chest, not at the girls, but at whatever circumstances had led to this moment. He made a decision. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of this rain." He led them to his car, opened the back door, and they climbed in without hesitation, which worried him more than anything. They were too trusting, or too desperate. He turned up the heat, grabbed his gym towel from the trunk, and handed it back to them. "What are your names?" "I'm Emma," one said. "She's Lily." "I'm Vincent. Do you have a phone number for your mom?" They shook their heads in unison. "She has the phone," Emma said. Of course she did. Vincent pulled out his own phone, called 911, reported the abandoned vehicle and the children. The dispatcher said a unit would be there within 20 minutes. He started to relax. He'd done his civic duty, help was coming. He could make his meeting. Then Emma said, "I don't feel good," and vomited on his leather seats. The meeting with the councilman didn't happen. Vincent spent the next 3 hours at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where Emma was treated for what turned out to be a combination of hypothermia and a stomach virus. Lily stayed close to her sister, and Vincent stayed with both of them because no one else was there. The mother never showed up at the car. Police found her 2 hours later at a gas station 3 miles away, incoherent and high on opioids. The girls were placed in emergency foster care, and Vincent gave his statement to a social worker who looked at him with suspicion that his expensive suit and careful answers couldn't quite dispel. He drove home at midnight, his car reeking of vomit and disinfectant, and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch. He stood at his kitchen window, looking out at the rain that was finally stopping, and thought about 2 little girls who'd been left on a highway by a mother who couldn't take care of them. He thought about the fear in their eyes when he'd first approached, and the trust that had replaced it. He thought about the fact that he'd missed an important meeting, that Marco had called 4 times, that there would be consequences for his absence. And he thought about the way Emma had held his hand in the hospital, her small fingers gripping tight, and how that grip had felt like both a question and an accusation. Vincent Rossi had built his life on control, on maintaining clear boundaries between his world and the world of ordinary people. But something had shifted tonight. Some invisible line had been crossed, and he had the unsettling feeling that nothing would be quite the same. The rain had stopped. The city lights reflected in the wet streets, and somewhere in Philadelphia, 2 little girls were sleeping in a strange bed, wondering if anyone would come for them. Vincent finished his scotch and went to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. The call came 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon when Vincent was reviewing quarterly reports from his legitimate businesses. The number was unfamiliar. Local area code. "Mr. Rossi, this is Jennifer Chen from Child Protective Services. I'm calling about Emma and Lily Patterson." Vincent set down his pen. He'd tried not to think about the twins, had told himself that his responsibility ended when he'd handed them over to the authorities, but their faces had appeared in his mind at odd moments. While he was shaving, while he was listening to a contractor explain why a shipment was delayed, while he was lying awake at 3 a.m. "Yes? The girls have been asking about you. They're in temporary foster care, and the placement isn't going well. Emma in particular has been having nightmares, and both girls have been asking when Mr. Vincent is coming back." A pause. "I know this is unusual, but I wondered if you might be willing to visit them. Sometimes a familiar face can help with the transition." Vincent's first instinct was to refuse. He was not a social worker, not a counselor, not anyone who should be involved in the lives of traumatized children. He was a man who ran an organization that operated outside the law, who made decisions that sometimes resulted in violence, who lived in a world of calculated risks and necessary evils. But he heard himself saying, "When?" That's how Vincent found himself, on a gray Thursday afternoon, pulling up to a modest house in northeast Philadelphia. The foster mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a tired-looking woman in her 50s, who managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They're in the living room," she said. "I have 3 other kids here right now, all under 10. It's a lot." The living room was cluttered with toys and the noise of a television playing cartoons. Emma and Lily sat together on a worn couch, and when they saw Vincent, their faces transformed. "Mr. Vincent!" They rushed to him, and he found himself kneeling to their level as they wrapped their arms around him. The embrace was fierce, desperate, and it hit him like a physical blow. When had anyone last held him like this, with pure, uncomplicated need? "Hey," he said softly. "I heard you wanted to see me." They pulled back, and he could see the changes 3 days had made. Emma looked thinner, her eyes shadowed. Lily's hands were clenched into small fists. They were wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, donations probably, and their hair was pulled back in messy ponytails. "Are you taking us home?" Emma asked. The question broke something in his chest. This is your home right now. Mrs. Rodriguez is taking care of you." "We don't like it here," Lily whispered. "The other kids are mean, and Emma keeps having bad dreams." Vincent looked at Mrs. Rodriguez, who shrugged helplessly. "I do my best, but I'm not a miracle worker. These girls need stability, therapy, individual attention. I'm a way station, not a solution." He spent 2 hours with them. They showed him drawings they'd made, dark scribbles that a child psychologist would probably find concerning. They told him about their mother, speaking in the careful way children do when they're trying to protect a parent who's hurt them. They asked him questions about his car, his house, his life, with the hunger of kids who were trying to understand the world of adults who had power. When it was time to leave, Emma grabbed his hand. "Will you come back?" Vincent looked down at her. In her eyes, he saw something he recognized, the look of a person trying to survive in a world that made no sense, trying to find something solid to hold on to. He'd seen that look in the mirror when he was 18, standing at his father's funeral. "Yeah," he said. "I'll come back." Marco noticed. "You're distracted," his cousin said on Wednesday, after Vincent had missed a detail in a contract negotiation. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're thinking about those kids." Marco leaned back in his chair. "Vinny, I get it. What happened to them is terrible. But you can't save everyone. You can't fix this. I'm not trying to fix anything, I'm just visiting. You're getting attached. That's dangerous. For you and for them." Vincent knew Marco was right, but he kept visiting anyway. The girls began to open up. Emma told him about school, how she loved reading but hated math. Lily confessed that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. They talked about their father, a man they barely remembered, who'd left when they were 3. They talked about the times before their mother got sick, when she'd take them to the park and make them pancakes shaped like animals. "Do you think she'll get better?" Lily asked one day. Vincent chose his words carefully. "I think she loves you very much, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people need help they can't get. Like you helped us on the highway?" "Yeah, like that." What Vincent didn't tell them was that he'd made inquiries. The mother, Sarah Patterson, was in a court-mandated rehab program. Her history showed multiple arrests, multiple failed attempts at sobriety. The prognosis wasn't good. The girls would likely end up in long-term foster care, possibly separated if a family couldn't be found to take both. He also didn't tell them that he'd been doing research, reading about foster care, about adoption, about what happened to kids who fell through the cracks of the system. The statistics were grim. The outcomes were worse. On Friday of the second week, Jennifer Chen called again. "Mr. Rossi, I need to talk to you about something. Can you come to my office?" Her office was in a government building downtown, all fluorescent lights and worn carpet. She gestured to a chair across from her desk, and Vincent sat, feeling like he was back in the principal's office. "I've been doing this job for 12 years, Jennifer said. "I've seen a lot of things, and I've learned to trust my instincts about people." She looked at him directly. "Those girls have bonded with you in a way I rarely see. You've been consistent, reliable, present. They feel safe with you." "Okay," Vincent said carefully. "I did a background check on you. Standard procedure." She pulled out a file. "Vincent Michael Rossi, age 42, owner of Rossi Import-Export and several other businesses. No criminal record, no arrests, financially stable. Single, never married, no children." She paused. "But there are rumors, associations, questions about the nature of your business interests." Vincent's face remained neutral. "I run legitimate businesses. If there are rumors, they're just that, rumors. I'm sure." Her tone suggested she wasn't sure at all. "Here's my dilemma. Those girls need a permanent placement. Their mother is likely going to lose parental rights. Their father is unknown. They have no other family, and they've made it very clear that they want to be with you." Vincent's heart rate increased, but his expression didn't change. "I'm not a foster parent. I'm not qualified. You could be. The process takes time, requires training, background checks, home studies, but it's possible. She leaned forward. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm saying that if you're considering it, we should talk about what that would mean. Vincent drove back to his office in a daze. The idea was insane. He was a mafia boss. He lived a life where violence was always a possibility, where enemies were real, where the FBI had an open investigation into his activities. He couldn't bring children into that world, but he kept seeing Emma's face when she'd asked if he was taking them home. He kept feeling the weight of Lily's hand in his. That night, he called his sister. Angela listened without interrupting as he explained the situation. Vinny, she said finally, are you seriously considering this? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. It's crazy, right? It's crazy, she agreed. But I've never heard you sound like this. Like you actually care about something beyond the business. I care about things. You care about family. You care about loyalty. But this is different. This is about two little girls who need someone, and you're thinking about being that someone. She was quiet for a moment. What would Nono say? Their grandfather? Vincent thought about the old man, dead now for 15 years, who'd taught him about honor and respect and the rules that governed their world. He'd say family is everything. He'd say you protect the innocent. Then you have your answer. But Vincent wasn't sure he did, because protecting the innocent and bringing them into his life were two very different things. He lay awake that night, listening to the silence of his too large house, and thought about what it would mean to have children here. Laughter, chaos, vulnerability, risk. The rain started again, tapping against the windows, and Vincent remembered two small figures on a highway shoulder, waiting for someone to stop. He'd stopped, and now he couldn't seem to walk away. The decision to pursue foster certification felt both inevitable and impossible. Vincent began the process on a Monday morning, filling out forms in Jennifer Chen's office while she explained the requirements: background checks, financial disclosure, home study, training classes, references, the machinery of bureaucracy grinding slowly toward a conclusion that was far from certain. I have to be honest with you, Jennifer said. Your application is going to get extra scrutiny. You're a single man, no prior experience with children, and there are questions about your business. The committee will be cautious. I understand. What he didn't say was that he'd already taken steps to insulate himself. He'd moved certain operations further from his direct oversight, created additional layers between himself and anything that could be considered criminal activity. Marco had looked at him like he was losing his mind. You're restructuring the entire organization for two kids you barely know? His cousin had said. I'm protecting them. And myself. If I'm going to do this, it has to be clean. Nothing we do is clean, Vinny. Then we make it cleaner. The training classes were surreal. Vincent sat in a community center in Manayunk with a dozen other prospective foster parents, mostly couples, mostly younger than him, and learned about trauma-informed care, attachment disorders, the effects of neglect and abuse. He took notes in a leather-bound notebook, the same way he took notes in business meetings, treating it with the same seriousness. He learned that children who'd experienced trauma often tested boundaries, pushed away the people trying to help them. He learned about triggers and coping mechanisms, and the importance of consistency. He learned that love wasn't enough, that structure and patience and professional support were essential. And he kept visiting Emma and Lily, twice a week, sometimes 3 times, working around his business obligations. He took them to the Please Touch Museum, where they ran through exhibits with the first real joy he'd seen from them. He took them to Reading Terminal Market, where they ate Amish donuts and watched the crowds. He took them to his house in Gladwin, with Jennifer's permission and supervision, and they explored the rooms with wide eyes, asking if this could really be their home. Maybe, he told them, if everything works out, but it takes time. We can wait, Emma said solemnly. We're good at waiting. That statement haunted him. They were 9 years old, and they were already good at waiting. Good at disappointment. Good at having hope crushed. He wouldn't crush their hope. He couldn't. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The first sign of trouble came in week 4. Vincent was in his office when Marco burst in without knocking, his face pale. We have a problem. A big one. Vincent looked up from his computer. What? James Patterson. That name mean anything to you? Vincent searched his memory. No. Should it? It should now, He's a federal prosecutor, Eastern District. And he's been building a case against our operations for the last 18 months. Marco dropped a folder on the desk. He's the one behind the grand jury investigation. He's the one pushing the FBI to flip our associates. And Vinny, he's the father of those 2 girls. The world tilted. Vincent opened the folder, saw the photograph of a man in his early 40s, sharp-featured, intense eyes. James Patterson, Assistant U.S. Attorney, specializing in organized crime. You're sure? Positive. I had Tony do some digging after you started the foster process. Wanted to make sure there were no surprises. Well, surprise. Marco's voice was bitter. The guy who's trying to put you in prison is the biological father of the kids you're trying to adopt. Vincent's mind raced. The girls said their father left when they were 3. They don't know him. Doesn't matter. He's still their father, legally. And if he finds out you're trying to get custody... Marco didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Vincent stared at the photograph. James Patterson looked like a man who believed in justice, in the law, in the clear lines between right and wrong. He looked like the kind of man who would see Vincent as everything wrong with the world. Does he know? Vincent asked. About the girls? About what happened? I don't think so. He's not in their lives. The mother never listed him on any of the emergency forms. But if he finds out, if someone connects the dots, it would look like I'm trying to get leverage, like I'm using his kids to compromise his investigation. Exactly. Vincent closed the folder. His hands were steady, but his mind was chaos. This changed everything. If Patterson discovered that Vincent Rossi, his primary target, was pursuing custody of his daughters, he would never allow it. He would fight it with every resource at his disposal, and he would be right to do so. What kind of father would want his children raised by a criminal? But Vincent wasn't just a criminal. He was also the man who'd stopped on a rainy highway, the man who'd sat in a hospital waiting room, the man who'd shown up week after week when no one else had. What do you want to do? Marco asked. Vincent was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Nothing. We do nothing. I continue the process. If Patterson finds out, we deal with it then. That's a huge risk. Everything worth doing is a risk. But the knowledge sat in Vincent's stomach like lead. He continued the visits, continued the classes, continued the home study process. The social worker who came to his house in Gladwin walked through every room, asked questions about his lifestyle, his work schedule, his support system. Vincent answered carefully, truthfully where possible, evasively where necessary. This is a beautiful home, the social worker said, standing in the living room with its high ceilings and carefully chosen furniture. But it's very quiet, very adult. Can you imagine children here? Vincent looked around, trying to see it through her eyes. I can imagine it differently. I can imagine toys and noise and mess. I can imagine it being a home instead of just a house. She made a note. Why do you want to do this, Mr. Rossi? Really? He could have given her the easy answer, the one about wanting to help, about feeling a connection. Instead, he told her the truth. Because I know what it's like to lose your father suddenly, to have your life change in an instant, to feel like the world is dangerous and nothing is certain. He met her eyes. I can't give them back what they've lost, but I can give them stability, safety, a chance. And your business? The demands on your time? I'll make it work. I have people who can handle the day-to-day operations. My family will help, whatever it takes. She made more notes, her expression unreadable. The midpoint came on a Tuesday in December. Vincent was at his office when Jennifer Chen called. Her voice was tight, professional, but he could hear the strain underneath. Mr. Rossi, we need to meet. Today, if possible. There's been a development. His stomach dropped. What kind of development? Not over the phone. Can you come to my office at 4? He was there at 3:45. Jennifer's face told him everything before she spoke. James Patterson has surfaced. He's filed a motion to intervene in the custody case. He's claiming parental rights. Vincent sat down slowly. He abandoned them 6 years ago. He says he was young, overwhelmed, that he made a mistake. He says he's been trying to get his life together, establish his career, so he could provide for them properly. And now that their mother is unable to care for them, he wants to step up. Does he know about me? About my application? Jennifer hesitated. Not yet, but he will. The court will notify all interested parties. Mr. Rossi, I have to ask, did you know who he was when you started this process? No. I found out a few weeks ago. I didn't think it mattered because he wasn't in their lives. It matters now. She pulled out another file. He's a federal prosecutor, highly respected. No criminal record, stable career, good income. On paper, he's an ideal candidate for custody. On paper, he's a stranger to those girls. They don't know him. They don't want him. They're 9 years old. The court will consider their wishes, but ultimately, the law favors biological parents, especially parents who can demonstrate they're trying to make amends for past mistakes. Vincent felt the situation slipping away from him. So, what happens now? There will be a hearing. Patterson will make his case. You'll make yours. The judge will decide what's in the best interests of the children. She paused. Mr. Rossi, I have to tell you, if Patterson discovers who you are, what you're alleged to be involved in, he will use that against you, and it will be effective. Vincent drove to Mrs. Rodriguez's house. He needed to see the girls, needed to tell them what was happening. They deserved to know. They were in the backyard, bundling up sticks to make what Emma explained was a fairy house. When they saw him, they ran over, and he caught them both in a hug that felt like holding on to something precious and fragile. We need to talk, he said. He explained it as simply as he could. Their father wanted to be part of their lives again. There would be a meeting with a judge. Things might change. We don't want to live with him, Lily said immediately. We don't even know him. I know, but he's your father. The law says that matters. You matter, Emma said fiercely. You're the one who stopped. You're the one who came back. You're the one who's here. Vincent felt something crack in his chest. I'm going to fight for you. I promise. But I need you to understand that this might not go the way we want. Sometimes the world doesn't work the way it should. They held on to him, and he held on to them, and the December wind blew cold across the yard. That night, Vincent stood in his empty house and made a decision. He called his lawyer, not the one who handled his business interests, but a family law specialist his sister had recommended. I need you to prepare for a custody battle, he said, against a federal prosecutor who happens to be investigating me. The lawyer was quiet for a moment. That's quite a conflict of interest. Can we win? I don't know, but we can try. Vincent hung up and poured himself a drink. He stood at the window, looking out at the lights of Philadelphia spread below his hilltop house, and thought about the irony. He'd spent his entire adult life building walls, maintaining distance, keeping people at arm's length, and now he was fighting to bring 2 children into the center of his life. The rain started again, and Vincent watched it fall, remembering a highway shoulder and 2 small figures waiting for someone to stop. He'd stopped, and now he had to see it through, no matter the cost. The hearing was scheduled for January 15th, 6 weeks away. 6 weeks for Vincent to prepare his case, for James Patterson to prepare his, for 2 little girls to exist in limbo, wondering where they would end up. Vincent threw himself into preparation with the same intensity he brought to business. His lawyer, Rebecca Stern, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex custody cases. She didn't ask about the rumors surrounding Vincent's business, and he didn't volunteer information. Our strongest argument is attachment and stability, she explained in her office overlooking Rittenhouse Square. You've been consistent in the girls' lives for 3 months. You've completed the foster training. You have the financial resources to provide for them. Patterson has been absent for 6 years, but he's their biological father. Yes, and he's a federal prosecutor with a clean record and a compelling narrative about redemption and second chances. It's going to be an uphill battle. She looked at him directly. Is there anything in your background that could hurt us? Anything Patterson might find? Vincent chose his words carefully. I run legitimate businesses, but I come from a family with a complicated history. There are associations, rumors, nothing that's ever resulted in charges. Patterson will use those associations. He'll paint you as dangerous, unsuitable. We need to be ready for that. What Rebecca didn't know, what Vincent couldn't tell her, was that Patterson's investigation was getting closer. Marco had sources inside the FBI, and the news was bad. They were building a RICO case, connecting Vincent to a network of illegal activities. They had wiretaps, financial records, cooperating witnesses. It was only a matter of time before indictments came down. Vincent was trying to save 2 children while his entire world was collapsing around him. He kept visiting Emma and Lily, but now there was a new tension in their time together. They'd been told about their father's petition, had been interviewed by a court-appointed child psychologist. They clung to Vincent with desperate intensity, as if they could will him into being their permanent guardian. What if the judge says we have to go with him? Emma asked one day. They were at Vincent's house, decorating a Christmas tree he'd bought specifically for them. It was the first Christmas tree he'd had in his home in 20 years. "Then we'll deal with it," Vincent said. "But I'm going to fight for you, I promise." "Do you always keep your promises?" The question hit him like a punch. In his business, promises were currency, and breaking them had consequences. But this was different. This was a promise to children who'd already been broken too many times. "I try," he said. "I really try." James Patterson requested a meeting in mid-December. Rebecca advised against it, but Vincent agreed. He needed to see the man, needed to understand who he was dealing with. They met at a coffee shop in Center City, neutral territory. Patterson arrived exactly on time, dressed in a suit that was quality but not expensive, his face showing the strain of a man carrying too much weight. Vincent recognized something in him immediately, the look of someone trying to outrun their past. They sat across from each other, two men who should have been enemies, but were connected by two little girls neither of them had planned for. "Thank you for meeting me," Patterson said. His voice was measured, controlled. "I know this situation is complicated. That's one word for it." Patterson stirred his coffee, not drinking it. "I need you to understand something. I didn't abandon Emma and Lily because I didn't care. I left because I was 23 years old, terrified, completely unprepared to be a father. Sarah and I were a disaster together. I thought they'd be better off without me. And now? Now I'm 41. I have a career, stability, the resources to provide for them. And I've spent 6 years regretting the worst decision I ever made." He looked up, meeting Vincent's eyes. "I know you stopped for them on the highway. I know you've been visiting them. I'm grateful for that. But they're my daughters. I'm their father. I need to make this right." Vincent kept his voice level. "They don't know you. They're afraid of you. You're a stranger asking to upend their lives again. I know, but I can change that. I can build a relationship with them. I can be the father they deserve." Patterson leaned forward. "Mr. Rossi, I've done research on you. I know who you are, what you're alleged to be involved in. You seem like a decent man in some ways, but you live in a world that's dangerous. That's not the environment for children. And you know this how? You've been investigating me? I'm a prosecutor. It's what I do." Patterson's jaw tightened. "There's an active federal investigation into your organization. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think that wouldn't matter?" Vincent felt the anger rise but kept it controlled. "I've never been charged with anything. I run legitimate businesses. Whatever investigation you're talking about, it has nothing to do with my ability to provide a safe, stable home for Emma and Lily. Doesn't it? How can you guarantee their safety when you're potentially facing federal charges? I'm not facing anything. And even if I were, those girls need someone who's been there for them. Someone they trust. Not a stranger with good intentions and 6 years of absence." They stared at each other across the small table, and Vincent saw the truth in Patterson's eyes. This wasn't just about the girls. This was about Patterson's own guilt, his own need for redemption. He wanted to save his daughters to save himself. "I'm not withdrawing my petition," Patterson said finally. "I'm sorry, but I'm their father, and I'm going to fight for them." "So am I." Patterson stood, leaving his untouched coffee on the table. "For what it's worth, I believe you care about them. But caring isn't enough. They need a parent who can give them a normal life. You can't give them that." After he left, Vincent sat alone in the coffee shop, watching the Christmas shoppers pass by the window. He thought about normal lives, about what that even meant. His life had never been normal, but it had been his, and he'd survived it. And maybe that counted for something. His phone buzzed. A text from Marco. "We need to talk. Now." Vincent drove to their usual meeting place, a warehouse in South Philly that housed legitimate inventory and served as a secure location for sensitive conversations. Marco was pacing when he arrived, his face grim. "They're moving faster than we thought. The FBI executed search warrants this morning. 3 of our locations. They seized records, computers, everything." Vincent felt the ground shift beneath him. "What locations?" "The construction company, the waste management business, the trucking operation, all the places where we've been moving money." Marco stopped pacing. "Vinny, they're building a case, and it's solid. We have maybe 3 months before indictments. 3 months. The custody hearing was in 4 weeks. Vincent did the math and felt everything collapsing. Who's cooperating? DeLuca. Maybe others. They're offering deals, trying to flip people. Marco's voice was tight with anger. 20 years we've been careful. 20 years of staying ahead. And now it's all falling apart. Vincent sat down on a crate, suddenly exhausted. His father's empire, his grandfather's legacy, his entire adult life, all of it crumbling. And in the middle of it, 2 little girls who needed him to be someone he wasn't sure he could be. "What do you want to do?" Marco asked. Vincent thought about Emma and Lily, about their faces when they saw him, about the promises he'd made, about the man he'd been trying to become for them. "We prepare for the worst," he said. "Move assets, secure the legitimate businesses, make sure everyone who needs to be protected is protected, and we do it quietly. And the custody case? I'm not giving up, not yet." But that night, alone in his house, Vincent faced the truth. He was a man under federal investigation, likely to be indicted within months. Even if he won custody, what kind of life could he offer Emma and Lily? A life where their guardian was on trial? A life where they might have to visit him in prison? Maybe Patterson was right. Maybe caring wasn't enough. The rain started again, harder this time, and Vincent stood at his window watching it fall. He remembered the first time he'd seen the girls, 2 small figures on a highway shoulder. He'd stopped because something in him had recognized their need, their vulnerability. Now he was the one who felt vulnerable, stripped of all the armor he'd built over decades. His phone rang. It was Jennifer Chen. "Mr. Rossi, I just got word. The FBI contacted Child Protective Services. They're asking questions about your foster application, about your contact with the girls. Patterson must have pushed them to investigate." Vincent closed his eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means your application is going to be denied. I'm sorry. The agency can't place children with someone under active federal investigation. It's policy. The hearing is still happening." "Yes, but without agency approval, your chances just drop to almost 0. The judge will side with Patterson. He's the biological father, he has a clean record, and you—" She stopped. "I'm the criminal," Vincent finished. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." After he hung up, Vincent poured himself a drink and sat in the dark. He thought about all the choices that had led him here. His father's death, his decision to take over the family business, 24 years of building an empire on sand. And he thought about 2 little girls who'd asked him if he always kept his promises. He'd promised to fight for them, but maybe the best way to fight for them was to let them go. The thought broke something in him that he didn't know could still break. Vincent Rossi, who'd faced down rivals and federal agents and his own conscience, sat alone in his empty house and felt the weight of his own failure. The rain fell, the city lights blurred, and somewhere in Philadelphia, Emma and Lily were going to sleep, still hoping for a miracle that Vincent couldn't give them. Vincent didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his success: expensive furniture, original artwork, shelves of books he'd collected but rarely read, and felt the emptiness of it all. He'd built an empire, but he'd never built a life. At 6 a.m, he made a decision. He called Rebecca Stern. "I need you to prepare a statement for the court. I'm withdrawing my petition for custody." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you sure? We still have 4 weeks. Things could change." "They won't change. The FBI investigation, the agency denial. Patterson is right. I can't give those girls a normal life. I can't even guarantee I won't be in prison this time next year. Vincent, I've seen you with them. I've seen how they respond to you. That matters." "It's not enough." His voice was flat, final. "Draft the statement. I'll sign it today." But before he could withdraw, he needed to tell Emma and Lily. He owed them that much. He drove to Mrs. Rodriguez's house, arriving before the girls left for school. They were eating breakfast, and when they saw him, their faces lit up with a joy that made his decision even harder. "Mr. Vincent, are you taking us to school?" "No. I need to talk to you about something important." They sat together on the worn couch, and Vincent searched for words that wouldn't destroy them. But there were no good words for what he had to say. "You know there's going to be a hearing about where you'll live, about whether you'll be with me or with your father." They nodded, their faces suddenly serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what's best for you, and I think—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "I think your father can give you things I can't. A normal life, a clean start, no complications." "We don't want a normal life," Emma said fiercely. "We want you." "I know, but sometimes what we want and what's best aren't the same thing." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You're leaving us, just like everyone else." The accusation hit him like a physical blow. "No, I'm not leaving. I'm trying to do what's right." What's right is keeping your promise. Emma was crying now too. You said you'd fight for us. You promised. Vincent pulled them both close, feeling their small bodies shake with sobs. He'd faced down dangerous men without flinching, but these tears unmade him completely. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. He left them there, crying, and drove away with their voices echoing in his head. He'd thought he was protecting them, but maybe he was just protecting himself from the pain of failing them. He was halfway back to his office when his phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Rossi, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm the psychologist who's been working with Emma and Lily. Yes, I heard you're planning to withdraw your petition. I'm calling to tell you that would be a mistake. Vincent pulled over to the side of the road. With all due respect, you don't understand the situation. I understand that those girls have experienced significant trauma. I understand that they've formed a secure attachment to you, the first healthy attachment they've had in years. And I understand that if you abandon them now, it will confirm their worst fear, that they're not worth fighting for. I'm not abandoning them. I'm stepping aside so their father can... Their father is a stranger motivated by guilt. You're the person who's been showing up, consistently, for 3 months. Do you know how rare that is? How valuable? But I'm under federal investigation. I might be indicted. I can't give them stability. Stability isn't just about legal status or financial security. It's about emotional consistency. It's about being present. You've given them that. Dr. Mitchell's voice softened. Mr. Rossi, I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've seen a lot of foster situations. And I'm telling you, those girls need you. Whatever complications exist in your life, that need is real, and it matters. After she hung up, Vincent sat in his car, watching the morning traffic flow past. He thought about Emma's accusation. You're leaving us, just like everyone else. He thought about his own father, killed when Vincent was 18. He thought about the moment when everything had changed, when he'd been forced to become someone he'd never planned to be. He thought about choice and responsibility and what it meant to fight for something that mattered, and he made a different decision. Vincent called Rebecca. Forget the withdrawal. We're going to trial, but we're doing it my way. What does that mean? It means I'm done hiding. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it, about my family, my business, the investigation, and I'm going to let the judge decide if that disqualifies me from being what those girls need. Vincent, that's incredibly risky. You could be giving Patterson ammunition. I know, but I'm tired of living in the shadows. If I'm going to fight for Emma and Lily, I'm going to do it honestly. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Vincent met with Rebecca daily, crafting a strategy that was part confession, part defense. He gathered character witnesses, his sister Angela, his priest, business associates who could speak to his legitimate operations. He prepared himself to face James Patterson in court and tell the truth about who he was. And he kept visiting the girls. He apologized for scaring them, explained that he'd been confused but was clear now. He was going to fight, and he wasn't going to give up. Promise? Emma asked. Promise. The night before the hearing, Vincent stood in what he'd started thinking of as the girls' room, a bedroom in his house that he'd begun furnishing with twin beds, colorful curtains, shelves for books and toys. It was still mostly empty, a room full of hope and possibility. Marco found him there. You ready for tomorrow? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Vinny, if you lose, if Patterson gets custody, what then? Vincent looked at his cousin. Then I'll have tried. I'll have fought for something that mattered. And maybe that's enough. And if you win, if somehow the judge sides with you, the FBI investigation doesn't go away. You could still end up in prison. I know, but maybe I can set things up so the girls are protected. Angela would take them if something happened to me. I'd make sure they're provided for, that they have stability even if I can't be there. You're really willing to risk everything for them. It wasn't a question, but Vincent answered anyway. They're not everything. They're 2 kids who need someone. But yeah, I'm willing to risk everything, because for the first time in 24 years, I'm fighting for something that's actually worth fighting for. The morning of the hearing, Vincent dressed with care, a dark suit, conservative tie, the appearance of respectability, but he wasn't trying to hide anymore. He was just trying to be the best version of himself. The courtroom was in the family court building downtown, a modern structure that somehow still managed to feel oppressive. Vincent arrived with Rebecca, and they took their seats at one table. Across the aisle, James Patterson sat with his lawyer, looking nervous and determined. Emma and Lily were in a waiting room with Jennifer Chen. They wouldn't testify. The judge had decided they were too young, but they would meet with her privately. Judge Maria Santos entered, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. She reviewed the files, looked at both men, and began. "This is an unusual case," she said. "We have a biological father seeking to reclaim custody after 6 years of absence, and a non-relative foster applicant who has formed a bond with the children. Both of you believe you're acting in the best interests of Emma and Lily Patterson. My job is to determine what those best interests actually are." Patterson's lawyer went first, presenting a compelling narrative of redemption. A young man who'd made a mistake, who'd spent years building a stable life, who was now ready to be the father he should have been all along. Patterson himself testified, his voice breaking as he talked about his regret, his love for his daughters, his determination to make amends. It was effective. Vincent could see the judge's expression soften. Then it was Vincent's turn. Rebecca called him to the stand, and he swore to tell the truth. And then, for the first time in his life, Vincent Rossi told the complete truth about who he was. "My name is Vincent Michael Rossi. I'm 42 years old. I run several businesses in Philadelphia, some legitimate, some that operate in gray areas of the law. I come from a family with deep ties to organized crime. My grandfather was a numbers runner. My father expanded the operation. I inherited it when I was 18, after my father was killed." He saw Patterson's lawyer lean forward, sensing victory. "I've never been convicted of a crime. I've never been charged with a crime. But I won't pretend that I'm innocent of everything. I've made choices that were legally questionable. I've associated with people who operate outside the law. And yes, I'm currently under federal investigation." Judge Santos was watching him intently. "I'm telling you this because I'm done hiding. If you ask me if I'm a perfect candidate to raise 2 children, the answer is no. I'm not. I'm a single man with a complicated past and an uncertain future. But I'm also the man who stopped on a rainy highway when Emma and Lily needed help. I'm the man who's shown up every week for 3 months. I'm the man they trust." He looked directly at the judge. "I can't promise you that my life won't get more complicated. I can't promise you that the federal investigation won't result in charges. But I can promise you that I will fight for those girls with everything I have. I will protect them, support them, love them. I will be present in their lives, consistently, no matter what else happens." "And if you're indicted?" the judge asked. "If you go to trial, possibly to prison, then I've made arrangements. My sister is prepared to take custody. The girls would be provided for financially. They would have stability and family support. But I don't believe it will come to that. I believe I can navigate the legal challenges I'm facing while still being what Emma and Lily need." Patterson's lawyer cross-examined him aggressively, trying to paint him as a dangerous criminal. Vincent answered every question honestly, admitting to associations, to questionable business practices, to the reality of his world. But he didn't apologize for stopping on that highway. He didn't apologize for caring. When the testimony was complete, Judge Santos called for a recess. "I need to meet with the children privately. We'll reconvene in 2 hours." Vincent waited in a conference room, drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about what was happening. Rebecca tried to be encouraging, but they both knew it could go either way. When they returned to the courtroom, Emma and Lily were back in the waiting room. Judge Santos looked tired. "I've reviewed all the evidence," she said. "I've spoken with the children. This is one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make." Vincent's heart was pounding. "Mr. Patterson, you've presented a compelling case for redemption. You clearly love your daughters and want to be part of their lives. But love and good intentions aren't sufficient. You've been absent for 6 years. You're a stranger to these children. And while I believe your desire to reconnect is genuine, I'm not convinced that immediate full custody is in their best interests." Patterson's face fell. "Mr. Rossi, your testimony was remarkably honest, perhaps too honest for your own good." A slight smile. "You've acknowledged serious concerns about your background and your current legal situation. Under normal circumstances, those concerns would disqualify you from foster placement." Vincent felt his hope dying. "But these aren't normal circumstances. Emma and Lily have formed a secure attachment to you. Doctor, Mitchell's evaluation makes clear that you've provided them with something they desperately need: consistent, reliable care from someone they trust. And your willingness to be completely honest about your limitations actually speaks to your character." The judge paused, and Vincent held his breath. "Therefore, I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Rossi with conditions. You will continue therapy for the girls. You will submit to regular home visits from Child Protective Services. And if you are indicted on federal charges, we will immediately revisit this arrangement. Mr. Patterson, you will have supervised visitation rights, with the goal of building a relationship with your daughters. We'll review the situation in 6 months. Vincent couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just heard. Mr. Rossi, I'm taking a significant risk with this decision. Don't make me regret it. I won't, Your Honor. I promise. Then we're adjourned. The courtroom erupted in motion. Patterson was arguing with his lawyer. Rebecca was shaking Vincent's hand. Jennifer Chen was smiling. And Vincent was walking toward the waiting room, toward 2 little girls who were about to learn that they had a home. When he opened the door, they looked up at him with identical expressions of hope and fear. "You're coming home with me," he said. They flew into his arms, and Vincent held them tight, feeling the weight of responsibility and joy and terror all at once. He'd won. Against all odds, against all reason, he'd won. But the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first night was chaos. Emma and Lily moved into Vincent's house with 2 garbage bags of belongings and a lifetime of trauma. They explored every room, touched everything, asked 1,000 questions. Where would they sleep? Could they really stay? What if someone changed their mind? Vincent answered patiently, showing them their room, now fully furnished with twin beds, matching dressers, and a bookshelf he'd filled with books from the children's section of a bookstore in Chestnut Hill. He showed them where they could keep their clothes, their toys, their treasures. "This is really ours?" Lily asked, running her hand over the soft comforter on her bed. "Really yours?" That night, Vincent made spaghetti, the only thing he knew how to cook with any confidence, and they ate together at his dining room table. The girls were quiet, overwhelmed, processing the enormity of the change. After dinner, he helped them with baths, read them stories, tucked them into their new beds. "Mr. Vincent?" Emma said as he was turning out the light. "Yeah? Can we call you something else?" Mr. Vincent sounds weird now. Vincent's throat tightened. "What do you want to call me? Maybe just Vincent? Or—" She hesitated. "We don't have to call you Dad. We know you're not our dad. But maybe something like that?" He sat on the edge of her bed. "How about we figure it out as we go? You call me whatever feels right." "Okay." She was quiet for a moment. "Vincent? Yeah? Thank you for keeping your promise." He kissed her forehead, then Lily's, and left the room with his heart full of something he couldn't name. The first weeks were an adjustment. Vincent had to learn how to be responsible for 2 children, getting them to school, helping with homework, making sure they ate vegetables, managing bedtimes. His business suffered from his divided attention, but Marco stepped up, handling more of the day-to-day operations. "You're different," his cousin observed one day. "Softer." "I'm not soft. You made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse this morning. I saw the picture Angela posted." Vincent couldn't help but smile. They liked them. The federal investigation continued, a dark cloud on the horizon. Vincent's lawyers were negotiating with prosecutors, trying to find a resolution that wouldn't result in prison time. It was complicated, expensive, and uncertain. But Vincent had made a decision. He was getting out of the illegal side of the business. Slowly, carefully, he was extracting himself from the operations that had defined his adult life. It meant losing money, losing power, losing the identity he'd built. But it also meant having a chance at a future with Emma and Lily. "You're really doing this," Marco said. "You're walking away from everything Nono and your father built. I'm walking toward something better, something that matters more." James Patterson was another complication. The supervised visits were awkward, tense. The girls were polite but distant with their biological father, and Patterson clearly struggled with the situation. He'd wanted to be their savior, and instead he was the stranger trying to build a relationship from nothing. Vincent tried to be gracious, to facilitate the visits, to encourage the girls to give their father a chance. It wasn't easy. Part of him wanted to keep them all to himself, to shut Patterson out completely, but he knew that wasn't fair to anyone. 3 months after the custody hearing, Patterson requested a meeting. They met at the same coffee shop, the same table. "I wanted to thank you," Patterson said. Vincent was surprised. "For what?" "For taking care of my daughters. For being what they needed when I wasn't there." He looked down at his coffee. "I've been angry at you for months. Angry that you were the one they wanted, that you were the one they trusted. But I've been watching you with them, and I can see that you love them, that you're trying to do right by them." "I am." I also wanted to tell you that I'm dropping the federal investigation. Vincent's head snapped up. What? I've recused myself from the case. Conflict of interest. I can't prosecute the man who has custody of my children. The case will continue without me, but I won't be part of it. Patterson met his eyes. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. But I hope it helps. Vincent didn't know what to say. This man, who had every reason to hate him, was stepping aside. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just take care of them. And maybe let me be part of their lives. Not as their father, not yet, but as someone who cares about them. I can do that. They shook hands. Two men who'd been enemies finding common ground in the love of two little girls. The federal case did continue, but without Patterson's driving force, it lost momentum. Vincent's lawyers negotiated a settlement, significant fines, probation, but no prison time. He agreed to divest from certain businesses, to cooperate with ongoing investigations, to stay clean. It cost him millions. It cost him his reputation in certain circles, but it bought him a future. 6 months after the custody hearing, Judge Santos held a review. Vincent sat in the same courtroom, but this time, Emma and Lily were with him, holding his hands. The judge reviewed the reports from Child Protective Services, from Dr. Mitchell, from the school, all positive. The girls were thriving. They were in therapy, processing their trauma, but they were happy, stable, safe. Mr. Rossi, I have to admit I had my doubts about my decision, but the evidence is clear. You've provided these children with exactly what they needed. Judge Santos smiled. I'm granting you permanent custody, with the option to pursue adoption if that's something you all want. Emma and Lily squeezed his hand so tight it hurt. Outside the courthouse, Angela was waiting with her family. She hugged Vincent tight. Nonna would be proud, she whispered. Not of what you were, but of who you've become. That night, Vincent stood in the doorway of the girls' room watching them sleep. 9 months ago, he'd been a man alone, living in the shadows, building an empire on sand. Now he was a father, not perfect, not without complications, but present, committed, changed. The rain started, tapping against the windows, and Vincent remembered that November night on the highway. 2 small figures in the rain, a choice to stop. Everything had changed because of that choice. His business, his life, his identity. He'd lost things he'd thought were essential, but he'd gained something infinitely more valuable. He'd gained a family. Emma stirred, opened her eyes. Vincent, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. Go back to sleep. Love you, she mumbled, already drifting off. Vincent's breath caught. They'd never said it before. He stood there, processing the words, feeling their weight and their gift. Love you too, he whispered. He went downstairs, poured himself a small glass of scotch, and stood at the window. Philadelphia spread out before him, the city he'd been born in, the city he'd tried to control, the city that had shaped him. He thought about his father, killed in a parking lot 24 years ago. He thought about the path that death had set him on, the choices he'd made, the man he'd become. And he thought about 2 little girls sleeping upstairs, safe and loved, who had given him a chance to be someone different, someone better. Vincent Rossi had spent most of his life building walls, maintaining power, keeping people at a distance. But on a rainy November night, he'd stopped for 2 strangers, and that single act of compassion had torn down every wall he'd ever built. He'd thought he was saving them, but the truth was, they'd saved him. The rain fell, the city lights reflected in the wet streets, and in a house in Gladwin, a man who'd been a criminal, a boss, a figure of fear, was learning how to be a father. It wasn't easy. It would never be easy. But it was real, and it was his, and it was worth every sacrifice. Vincent finished his scotch and went upstairs. He checked on the girls one more time, adjusted Emma's blanket, picked up the stuffed animal that had fallen from Lily's bed. Then he went to his own room and slept better than he had in 24 years. Outside, the rain stopped. The clouds cleared. And over Philadelphia, the stars came out, bright and clear and full of promise. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What did you think of Vincent's journey? Have you ever made a choice that changed your life completely? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to tell me what part of the world you're listening from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more stories that matter. Until next time, Take care.